Damien Lockridge's champagne glass stilled midair as the sound of a child's cries tore through the glittering noise of a New Year's Eve party. It wasn't the usual celebration he'd grown accustomed to. This was different, a piercing, desperate wail that cut through the laughter, the music, and the clinking glasses. Damien, the billionaire CEO of a global empire, stood at the edge of his lavish mansion overlooking the Seattle skyline. The night was filled with the city's elite. But for him, it felt like just another night, just another business deal hidden behind the guise of a celebration. He didn't have time for emotions, for chaos, until now. As the cry continued, his instincts kicked in. He left the crowd, moving toward the source of the distress. There, standing alone in a corner of the grand ballroom, was a small boy, his face streaked with tears, his tiny body trembling in the cold of the large space. The boy's pain was raw. Yet his eyes, so much older than his years, looked up at Damien, desperate for comfort. Without thinking, Damien knelt down and pulled the boy into his arms. It was supposed to be a simple act of kindness, until the boy's sobs stopped for a brief moment. And then, she appeared. The woman in the doorway froze. Carmen, his ex. The woman he had abandoned years ago. The woman whose love he had lost. And now, the mother of the child in his arms. Damien's heart sank into his chest as the weight of the moment hit him. Have you ever tried to erase your past, only for it to come rushing back when you least expect it? Damien's world tilted, and for the first time in years, he was forced to confront everything he'd run from. Stay with us. The story is just beginning. Welcome back, my beautiful family, and to everyone watching for the first time, you're truly welcome here. I've missed you all so much. It's been a tough season with some technical issues, but by God's grace, everything is getting back on track. Thank you for your love and support. Before we begin, a short prayer for everyone watching. May God strengthen and comfort the women, guide and bless the men, and protect every single one of you. Amen. If you're new here, please hit subscribe and join the family. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from, my USA and UK family. I see you. And please watch till the end, because tomorrow's story is one you won't want to miss. Now, let's get into the story. The night was no longer about the party, the glamour, or the deals. It was about this moment, this child, this woman, and the life Damien never knew he had lost. How did it all get to this point? What had he missed? And could he ever make things right? To understand this moment, we have to go back to when it all began. Damien could feel the warmth of the champagne still tingling his lips, but it did nothing to drown the sudden cold settling in the pit of his stomach. His world, the one he'd spent years building, suddenly felt small, fragile, and out of his control. His gaze flickered between the child in his arms and the woman now standing before him, her eyes burning with a mixture of shock, anger, and something far worse, betrayal. Carmen. The name hit him like a fist. The memories came flooding back. The first time he met her in a cramped cafe on a rainy Seattle afternoon, the way she laughed, her eyes bright with ambition and joy. It was easy to forget how much he had wanted her, how much he had given her, until the world he had built got in the way. Their relationship had been passionate. They'd been inseparable. From the moment they met, there had been no turning back. He'd thought they were invincible, that nothing could ever shake the foundation they'd built together. But like all things, their love had been tested. And in the end, it crumbled. Damien could still remember the day they fought. He had been so caught up in his business dealings, his empire expanding at a rate faster than he could handle. Carmen, always supportive, had tried to be understanding, tried to be there for him. But there had been a breaking point, a moment when everything snapped. One misunderstanding turned into an argument, and that argument turned into silence. That silence stretched on for weeks, then months. And eventually, they parted ways, neither willing to face the raw truth of their relationship's collapse. He had buried that part of his life. He buried her. He buried his own guilt under the weight of success, convincing himself that he had done the right thing by walking away. It was easier that way, no complications, no distractions. But now, standing in front of him, was the one thing he could never outrun, the one consequence of his decisions that had haunted him in the quietest hours. Carmen, and her son, his son. Damien's eyes darted between Noah and Carmen, the realization crashing over him like a tidal wave. The boy in his arms, so familiar in his face, In his eyes was his blood, his flesh. He looked at Noah again, the shock registering more deeply with every passing second. The child's features were undeniably Carmen's, but the intensity in his dark eyes, the calmness mixed with a sharp, unspoken maturity, made the connection undeniable. This child was his son. He had a son he never knew existed. The room felt smaller now, the walls closing in on him. Every breath felt heavier than the last. For the first time in years, Damien felt unmoored, as though he had been floating through life with one hand on the wheel, only now realizing that the ship had long since veered off course. Carmen's voice sliced through the tension. "You never even knew, did you?" Her words were calm, almost bitter, but there was an edge to them. Damien wanted to speak, to apologize, to explain, but the words wouldn't come. What could he possibly say? How could he ever make up for the years he'd missed? Years in which he had built an empire while Carmen had built a life without him, and, it seemed, without ever needing him. She took a step forward, her expression unreadable, but the tension in her shoulders told him everything he needed to know. The anger, the hurt, the betrayal, but the question in her eyes was the one that cut deepest. Was it too late? Could they ever fix what had been broken all those years ago? Damien didn't know. How could he? He looked at Noah again. The boy had stopped crying, but his eyes were still filled with something that made Damien's heart ache. Something beyond sadness. It was a longing, a quiet desperation for something he hadn't had. A father, perhaps, or a family. Damien wanted to be the man this child needed, but how could he? How could he possibly undo the mistakes he had made? He gently set Noah down, kneeling in front of him. The child didn't flinch, didn't step back. His eyes met Damien's with an unwavering intensity. Damien swallowed hard. "Hey, buddy," he said softly. "You okay?" The boy nodded, but the tension in his small frame didn't dissipate. He wasn't convinced. Damien wasn't either. He wasn't sure how to fix this. How could he make up for everything? For the years he'd missed? He opened his mouth again to speak, but before he could form a sentence, Carmen's voice broke through the silence. "Don't pretend this is easy. It's not. You've missed years of his life, Damien. Years. And I've done it all on my own." Her words were a quiet storm, filled with resentment and unspoken pain. He could see it in her eyes now, the years of struggle, of sacrifice, the loneliness she had endured. She hadn't asked for his help, but she had needed it. She needed him. And now, here he was, a man who had built everything except the one thing that mattered. A family. Damien stood up, feeling the weight of the moment pressing on him from all sides. He wanted to reach out, to say something, anything, to bridge the chasm between them. But what could he say? Could words even fix the devastation his absence had caused? How could he offer comfort when he had been the one to create so much pain? His inner conflict raged inside him. He wasn't the man he used to be. Or maybe he was a man who thought he could escape his past, only to find it waiting for him in the most unexpected of ways. He didn't know what to do now, didn't know how to fix the wreckage. He couldn't go back. But did that mean he couldn't move forward? Have you ever run into someone from your past and realized your decisions have come back to haunt you? Damien never expected this moment. He never expected to meet his son for the first time in the middle of a party, never imagined facing the woman he had left behind with the weight of everything he had missed. If you feel the weight of regret, stick with us and subscribe to see what happens next. Damien held Noah close, his small body trembling against his chest. The boy's sobs had quieted, but his breathing was still uneven, as if he wasn't sure whether it was safe to let go of his pain. Damien's hand instinctively rubbed his back, trying to soothe him, but there was an underlying sense of stillness in Noah's posture. It was as though he had learned to control his emotions far too early, as if he had been taught not to cry out loud in order to keep the world at bay. The boy's head rested against Damien's shoulder, and for a moment, all Damien could feel was the weight of his child's sorrow. But as much as Damien tried to offer comfort, the walls that Noah had built around himself remained intact. The boy was too mature for his age, and Damien couldn't help but notice the sharpness in his eyes, the look of someone who had seen too much too soon. Noah's voice, soft and trembling, broke the silence. "Mommy works a lot. She always says she has to work so we can have food and clothes and things, but sometimes she's so tired she can't even talk." The words came out in small bursts between his sniffles. She says we're doing okay, but I don't know. I don't know how we can be okay if she's always so tired. Damien's heart clenched as he listened. The weight of those words hit him like a freight train. His thoughts raced, but there was something about Noah's calm, matter-of-fact delivery that shook him to his core. The boy wasn't just speaking about an inconvenience. He was speaking about survival, about a life of constant struggle that he had grown too accustomed to. Your mom sounds like a really strong woman, Damien said, his voice breaking a little. He wasn't sure what else to say, but he felt like the words were the only way to bridge the distance between them, to make Noah feel like he wasn't alone. She is, Noah replied simply. His tiny hands clung to Damien's chute, as if he was trying to hold onto something stable. But sometimes I'm scared she's gonna break. Damien closed his eyes for a brief moment, the gravity of the situation settling over him. He had built his empire, achieved more success than he had ever imagined. Yet here was a child, his child, living a life of exhaustion and worry. Carmen had carried that burden alone for years. She had worked multiple jobs to make sure Noah didn't go without, and yet he had never known any of this. He had never known the true cost of his absence. His guilt surged in a tidal wave. He could feel the weight of his abandonment pressing down on him now. Each day he'd spent building his business while Carmen had silently carried the weight of motherhood alone. He had missed everything. And now, here he was, holding a son he had never known, trying to soothe a child who had spent years in the shadow of his own failure. Is it possible to right the wrongs of the past? What would you do if you found out you have a child in need of you? If this hits home, stay with us. Hit subscribe. This journey is just beginning. The music from the party felt like it was miles away as Damien and Carmen stood in a quiet corner of the mansion. The room was dimly lit, the soft glow of the chandelier overhead casting shadows on the walls. The tension between them was thick, the kind that made every breath feel like a heavy burden. Neither of them spoke at first. The weight of the years stretched between them, each second filled with unspoken words. Carmen finally broke the silence. Her voice was low, controlled, but it cut through the air like a knife. Do you even realize what you've done, Damien? She asked, her eyes flashing with the anger that had been simmering for years. Do you understand how much you've hurt me? How much you've hurt him? She gestured to the hallway, where Noah had disappeared, his small figure swallowed by the mansion's vastness. I did everything. On my own. 4 years. And you were nowhere. Her words were sharp, like daggers, each one a reminder of the pain she had carried silently all this time. Damien could feel the guilt building inside him, a suffocating knot that tightened with every word she spoke. I know, he said quietly, his voice strained. I know I failed you both. I don't even know what to say anymore. Carmen, I'm sorry doesn't cover it. He took a step closer, but Carmen held up a hand, stopping him in his tracks. No, Damien, she said, her voice shaking now. Sorry isn't enough. It never has been. Do you think money can fix all of this? That throwing a few checks at us would make up for everything you walked away from? Damien flinched, the sting of her accusation hitting harder than he expected. He opened his mouth to argue, but the words caught in his throat. There was no defense for his silence, for the years of pushing her away, for the failure to show up when it mattered most. I thought if I could just succeed, if I could build something solid, I could fix everything, he admitted, his voice thick with regret. But I was wrong. I didn't see it. I was too afraid of losing control. I pushed you away, and I pushed myself further into this world of business, thinking that it would give me the answers. Carmen's eyes softened for a brief moment, but the hurt never left her expression. She crossed her arms tightly over her chest, the wall she had built over the years still standing firm. You never even tried to understand, she said, her voice softer now but still heavy with years of pain. You thought you could just send money. You thought if you could fix it financially, the rest would fall into place. But it didn't, did it? You weren't there for Noah. You weren't there for me. Damien felt his heart sink. Her words rang in his ears, a painful reminder how far he'd gone to avoid confronting what really mattered. He had spent so much of his life pretending that success in his career would be enough to cover up the emptiness of his personal life. But now, standing here with Carmen, that illusion shattered. I was scared, he whispered, the admission falling out before he could stop it. I was scared that if I tried to fix things, I would just make everything worse. I didn't know how to be the man you needed me to be. I didn't know how to be the father Noah needed. There was a long silence between them, the weight of their history hanging in the air like a storm about to break. Carmen didn't speak at first, but her gaze softened, a crack in the armor she had built around herself. I don't know if you can fix this, Damien, she said quietly. I don't know if you can fix us. But I need to know you're not just here to make yourself feel better. Damien's heart ached with the rawness of her words. He wasn't sure how to fix everything, or if he could, but he knew one thing for certain. He had to try. Have you ever tried to apologize for something that felt too big to fix? Damien is trying to make it right, but will it be enough? Subscribe now, because the truth is coming. Damien sat alone in a quiet corner of the mansion, the hum of the ongoing party now muffled in the distance. The air around him felt thick, almost suffocating, as the weight of his recent confrontation with Carmen lingered in his chest. He could still hear her words echoing in his mind. You weren't there for Noah. You weren't there for me. They cut deeper than any business failure, any deal gone wrong. In all his years of building an empire, of working to cement his place in the world, he had never once stopped to consider what mattered most. Family. His family. And now that realization hit him with full force. For the first time in his life, Damien saw clearly that his greatest responsibility wasn't securing another multi-million-dollar contract or expanding his company. It was this boy, Noah, the son he didn't even know existed until hours ago. His own flesh and blood, living a life far removed from the luxury and success that Damien had prided himself on. The magnitude of his neglect, his absence, was a weight he wasn't sure he could bear. He thought about the years he had spent wrapped up in his ambition, thinking he was doing the right thing by providing financially. He had built his empire, stacked his wealth, and lived in a world of numbers and meetings. But now, sitting here, all of that felt like nothing. A hollow shell. How could he have ignored the most important thing in his life? Later that evening, Carmen came to him again. But this time, her eyes were softer, the anger from earlier replaced by an exhaustion that only time could bring. She sat down beside him, the quiet between them now filled with the weight of unspoken truths. For a long moment, neither of them said anything, and then, softly, Carmen spoke. I've been working 2 jobs, Damien. Sometimes 3, just to make sure Noah has what he needs. And even then, it's not enough. Her voice trembled slightly, a fragile thing that betrayed the strength she had tried so hard to maintain. There are days I don't know how to keep going. How to make him believe that everything is okay when it's not. Damien listened, each word sinking deeper into him. He hadn't known. He hadn't known the extent of her sacrifice. You think I wanted to do this alone, she continued, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. But what choice did I have? You weren't there. You never were. Damien closed his eyes, the depth of her pain overwhelming him. She had been carrying the burden of everything, of raising a child, of working herself into the ground, all without ever asking for help. And he had been absent, believing that his success would somehow make up for his failures as a father. But nothing he had built could make up for what he had missed. Nothing could fix the years of hardship Carmen and Noah had endured alone. Damien's thoughts churned as he sat in the silence, a new resolve beginning to form. This was no longer about him. It wasn't about his empire, his pride, or his past mistakes. It was about Noah, about giving him the life he deserved, the life he had been denied. He stood up, his decision clear. He couldn't erase the past, but he could start fresh. He could be the father Noah needed, and he could be the partner Carmen deserved. But first, he knew it wouldn't be enough to throw money at the problem. Trust had to be earned. And that was where he would start. By earning their trust, by being present, by showing up in ways he never had before. Would you fight for redemption, even if it meant facing your darkest fears? Damien is ready to make a change, but will it be enough? If you believe in second chances, subscribe for the next part of this story. It wasn't easy, Damien quickly realized. He had built a business empire, managed high-stakes meetings, and negotiated multi-million-dollar deals, but none of those skills could prepare him for the challenge of earning his son's trust. Every attempt to connect with Noah felt like taking a step into the unknown. The boy, though outwardly composed, seemed distant, closed off in a way that made Damien wonder how much of him had been built to protect himself from disappointment. For the first few days, Noah kept his distance. He was polite, his small, careful smile never quite reaching his eyes, but he didn't pull away when Damien tried to engage. It was small progress, but progress nonetheless. Damien wasn't expecting miracles, but he couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that Noah deserved more than the cold shell of a father he had been. Carmen, always present in the background, watched this development carefully. Her protective instincts were fierce, and she had every reason to be wary of Damien's intentions. She wanted Noah to have a father, but she also knew the depth of the hurt they both had endured. Damien had left her alone to raise Noah, and he couldn't just waltz in now, pretending that the years of absence could be erased with a few gestures of kindness. One afternoon, Damien decided to take Noah out for a simple adventure. He didn't know what else to call it, just a trip to the nearby park, away from a mansion and the weight of the past. He wanted to show Noah that he was willing to make an effort, to prove that he could be more than just a man who wrote checks and showed up at the occasional event. "Hey, buddy," Damien said, his voice as casual as he could make it. "How about we go get some ice cream? My treat." Noah hesitated, his eyes flickering between Damien's face and the front door. It wasn't much of an invitation, but it was a start. Slowly, the boy nodded. "Okay," he said, his voice quiet but not dismissive. They spent the afternoon walking around the park, with Damien trying to make small talk, asking about school, about his favorite hobbies. Noah was reserved, answering with one-word responses, but there was something about the way he stayed by Damien's side, his pace just slightly slower, that made Damien believe the effort wasn't in vain. As they sat on a bench, eating their ice cream, Damien found himself watching Noah more closely. The boy's eyes weren't as wary as they had been the day before. There was a crack in the armor, a slight softness to his demeanor that made Damien feel like he had done something right. But the reality of the situation was undeniable. He was only beginning to scratch the surface. There was so much more to repair. Back at the mansion, Damien couldn't help but think about the challenges ahead. Being a father wasn't going to be easy. The weight of his past mistakes loomed over him, and every small step forward with Noah felt like a fragile victory. But he wasn't going to back down. He couldn't. Noah deserved better. Carmen deserved better. And he was going to do everything in his power to give them both the life they had missed. What would you do for a second chance at fatherhood? Damien is taking the first steps toward redemption. If you believe in family and forgiveness, stay with us. Subscribe to watch how this unfolds. The night was quiet, the echoes of the party long gone, leaving only the soft hum of the mansion's grand hall. Damien sat alone in the study, staring at the fire flickering in the hearth. He had spent the evening with Noah, trying to bridge the gap between them, but his thoughts kept drifting back to Carmen. He hadn't meant to hurt her. He had never set out to abandon them, but somehow he had, and now, the weight of it pressed on him, heavy and unrelenting. As if summoned by his thoughts, Carmen appeared in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the dim light from the hallway. She stepped inside, the soft click of her shoes on the marble floor cutting through the silence. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there, as if weighing whether or not to speak. Damien looked up, his heart in his throat. "Carmen." She nodded, but there was no softness in her gaze. "I've been thinking, Damien." Her voice was quiet, almost hesitant, but the pain in it was undeniable. About everything. Damien rose from his chair, instinctively reaching for her, but she held up a hand to stop him. "Don't," she said, her voice tight. "Just let me talk." For a moment, Damien stayed silent, watching her as she took a deep breath, her gaze dropping to the floor. "I've been raising Noah alone for so long," she began, her voice shaking slightly. "And it's not just the exhaustion. It's the guilt, too. The guilt of trying to make up for everything, of not being enough. But also, there's the resentment, for doing it alone, for you not being there when you should have been." Damien's heart tightened in his chest, the words he spoke hitting him harder than any accusation could. He had known it wouldn't be easy, but hearing the rawness of her feelings, the years of silence and pain she had carried, made him realize just how much he had failed her. "I was scared too, Carmen," Damien said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "I was scared of what would happen if I stayed. I thought I'd just get in the way." I didn't know how to fix what was broken. But I never stopped thinking about you. About Noah. Carmen looked up at him then, her eyes filled with years of hurt. You left us, Damien. You left us to fend for ourselves. And now, you think you can just walk back in and make it better? You think you can fix everything by just being here? Damien stood there, unsure of how to answer, but his heart ached with the truth of her words. He had never expected it to be easy, but the depth of her pain was something he could no longer ignore. I don't think I can fix everything, Damien said, his voice heavy with regret. But I want to try. I want to be there for both of you. Not just as a father, but as a partner. I want to help raise Noah. I want to make things right. Carmen, I know it won't be easy, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes. There was a long silence between them. As Carmen seemed to weigh his words, the conflict written clearly on her face. Damien could see the hesitation in her eyes, but there was something else there, too. Something that told him she wasn't ready to close the door entirely. Finally, she spoke, her voice softer this time. I don't know if I can forgive you. Not yet. But, for Noah's sake, we'll try. We'll take it one day at a time. Damien nodded, a mixture of relief and uncertainty flooding through him. This wasn't the end, but it was a beginning, a fragile one, but one nonetheless. Can two people who've hurt each other come back together for the sake of their child? Damien and Carmen are about to make a choice that will change everything. Subscribe now. You won't want to miss how this ends. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't fast, but it was progress. Damien, Carmen, and Noah began their slow, delicate journey toward rebuilding what had been broken for so many years. The road ahead wasn't smooth. It was filled with moments of uncertainty and hesitation. But in every small act of kindness, every evening spent around the dinner table, and every quiet conversation, they began to forge something new, a fragile sense of family. Damien had spent most of his life thinking that success was about control, about being able to shape the world around him according to his will. But in the weeks since that painful confrontation with Carmen, he had learned that being a father was about giving up control, about showing up when it mattered, and listening with an open heart. He wasn't perfect. He never would be. But he was trying, and for the first time, he understood what it meant to truly be present. His relationship with Noah had started to shift. They spent more time together, sharing small moments that slowly built the foundation of their connection, teaching Noah how to ride a bike, playing board games on rainy afternoons, talking about things that mattered to him. With every passing day, the boy grew a little more comfortable, a little less guarded. And in turn, Damien grew too, learning that fatherhood wasn't just about providing for his son, but about listening to him, being there when he needed it, and offering the support he had never given before. Carmen watched this transformation with cautious optimism. She could see the change in Damien, the sincerity in his efforts, but she wasn't ready to forget the past. Trust, once broken, could take a long time to rebuild. She had spent years doing everything on her own, never asking for help, never leaning on anyone for support. And even now, the weight of the responsibility she had carried alone still pressed on her shoulders. But with each passing day, she began to see Damien in a new light. The man who had once been absent and distant was now trying, truly trying, to be there for her and for Noah. It was a slow process, but she could see that he was committed. He wasn't just showing up out of obligation. He was showing up because he wanted to make things right. There were still moments of doubt, still times when Carmen felt the sting of old wounds, but she began to believe, just a little, that maybe, just maybe, they could start again. Not as they once were, but as something new, something stronger. For the first time in a long while, the three of them began to look forward instead of back. They began to make plans, small ones at first, like family dinners, outings to the park, and little trips. But they were plans for the future, plans where they could finally support one another in ways they never had before. Noah started to smile more. His laughter filled their home, and slowly, the house that had once felt so empty began to feel like a home again. Carmen and Damien still had a lot of work to do, but they were no longer trying to fix the past. They were focused on building a future. Sometimes, the road to redemption is long and hard, but every step forward is worth it. If you believe in second chances, subscribe and follow this journey until the end. The clock had just struck midnight. Outside the windows of their home, fireworks lit up the sky, their colors bright against the dark Seattle night. But inside, Damien, Carmen, and Noah weren't part of the grand celebration. Instead, they sat together at the kitchen table, surrounded by quiet warmth and the simple glow of a few candles. The years of pain and distance felt like a distant memory in that moment. The laughter of Noah echoed through the room as he recounted a funny story from school, his voice full of excitement. Carmen smiled softly, her eyes never leaving her son. Damien couldn't help but watch them both, feeling a deep sense of gratitude settle over him. This was what he had missed, the real moments. The kind that weren't about deals or business, but about connection, love, and the comfort of being with those who mattered most. It wasn't the New Year's Eve celebration that people dreamed of. There were no expensive dresses or lavish champagne toasting at the stroke of midnight. There was no grand ballroom, no glittering guest list. But it was more than enough. It was the first real celebration they had shared as a family in years. Carmen turned to Damien, her expression softer now, no longer guarded by the walls she had built over time. "Happy New Year," she said, her voice warm but full of meaning. Damien nodded, feeling the weight of those words settle deep within him. "Happy New Year," he echoed, his voice thick with emotion. Noah grinned and raised his glass of sparkling cider, the innocence of the gesture pulling at Damien's heart. "To family," Noah said, his eyes sparkling with a hope that only a child could carry. "To family," Damien repeated, his voice barely a whisper. He took the glass, raising it with a newfound sense of purpose and belonging. The year ahead still held uncertainty. There would be challenges, no doubt. The scars of the past wouldn't disappear overnight, and they would have to work through the bumps along the way. But for the first time, they knew they weren't facing those challenges alone. They had each other. Damien's thoughts drifted as he looked at the small, intimate family in front of him. He had spent so many years chasing success, convinced that wealth and power were the only things that would fill the void inside him. But in this quiet moment, surrounded by the people who meant everything to him, he realized the truth. All of his money, all of his achievements had never truly mattered. What mattered was this, being here, being present, being a father to Noah and a partner to Carmen. He had spent so much of his life trying to control everything, but now he knew that the real success wasn't about control. It was about love. It was about giving. And it was about the second chance to be part of a family that he thought he had lost forever. The past may be full of mistakes, but the future is wide open. If you believe in redemption, hope, and love, this story is for you. Subscribe for more. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazy and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. And do well to click on the button showing on your screen right now. Please stay subscribed and turn on notifications for the next story.